Stan, we're live.
And thank you to Larry, the Liberty guy, and thank you to John Kiley for that always fabulous, memorable rendition of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." John Kiley, the great organist from Fenway Park, who I'm sure many of you remember that great organ sound when you used to go to the game as kids. I mean, it just makes me think of Fenway Franks and Gould's Mustard. Remember how? Boy, we never passed today in today's COVID world. But what as a kid, I used to think it was so cool. You know, the hot dog vendor would be at the end of the row, walking up and down the aisle, and we'd inevitably have crummy seats in the middle of the long 20-person row. So you had to pass your money down, right? You'd pass it to the guy next to you, and he'd pass it to the gal next to him, and eventually it would get to the vendor, and then the vendor would send down the hot dogs, and everybody would pass them down. I used to think that was like so cool. I don't know if any guys experienced that, but I used to think that was so cool. So anyway, whenever I hear John Kiley take me out to the ball game, maybe we used to order hot dogs in the seventh inning. Maybe that's why I remember that so much. But anyway, that brings back such great memories for me going to Fenway Park as a kid. It's not so thrilling now as an adult, and especially not so thrilling after what Major League Baseball pulled last week. Okay, welcome in the Dugout. I'm your host, Mike Stenhouse. Today, two big guests. I'm going to start with our second guest and then work backwards. At the bottom of the hour, as we do every Thursday, we'll have Dr. Andrew Bostom on. He's the epidemiologist credentialed at Brown University. I guess if you were to sum it up, he's the anti-Fauci guy. He obviously doesn't have the worldwide national audience that Fauci has, but he's one to challenge the status quo, just like we do on the the liberal left status quo thinking in this state. We challenge that. Dr. Boston, always with great facts, always armed with great facts, data. He's a research guy now. He's not a clinical doctor now. He's a medical data analyst, and he always has the facts that demonstrate how so often these policies that have been imposed on us do not follow the science. And one of those policies, if you watched or heard about yesterday's show, were a group of parents we had on from Portsmouth and Westerly and North Kingston, I think, who are really very upset that their kids are being forced to take weekly COVID tests, even though they're asymptomatic, even though they pose no risk to themselves or to others, and with what they claim is an experimental test that hasn't even had FDA approval yet. But the larger point is, why are we having this forced mandated testing? And we've put the name on it. These are testing passports. We know that vaccination passports are coming, but there are already now testing passports. If you want to play high school sports in this state, you've got to get a test every week. And it's an invasive test, and it's not the regular test that we all take. So we'll talk about that with Dr. Boston, as well as all things COVID. And I want to bring up that first topic with our first guest, who we'll bring on in just a second, Tom Ward, former owner and publisher of the Valley Breeze. Sold the paper almost 2 years ago. He's Rhode Island misses one of the great traditional ethical journalists that there aren't too many of anymore, but he was one. So he's here to talk about all things Rhode Island. His friend and somebody he's covered professionally as well, Governor Dan Mckee, when he was mayor of Cumberland, continues to be a friend. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the General Assembly's leftward tilt and what Tom Ward thinks about that. So in fact, let's bring on Tom right now. Why wait any longer? He's the star of the show today. So Tom, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate it.
I'm going to go with the generic Rhode Island cap today in the Dugout. What are you going to go with? You're going to do it.
It's brutal. It's brutal. I mean, I love the Red Sox, but Major League Baseball has broken my heart in the past week. And so I'll wear it briefly, but it is heartbreaking.
I had to fold mine up officially on the show yesterday and put it away.
Yeah.
or Tuesday or on Tuesday show, and I don't know when I'll unpack it or if I'll.
Well, I'm with you. So that, and I hate my head in hats anyway, but I finally found last time you asked, and I finally found the one that was the right size because I have a giant noggin. And so, but I do have one good Red Sox hat from the
In baseball, I don't.
2013 World Series.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool.
And so that's my logo. But yeah, it was heartbreaking what happened.
Let's talk about that in a second, but just a little joke. I mean, since you brought it up, I would never have just visually said, "Oh, you got a, as you said, a large noggin." When in baseball, we had a term for that. We used to call guys with big. We used to call them bucket heads. You ever heard that term before?
No, but I'd be there.
You'd
I
be a
never knew it. I never knew it because I wasn't a big hat guy. And then when I grew up and I finally wanted a Red Sox hat, or and I got a one size fits all, and it was a joke. It was like a pimple on top of my head, and I said, "Oh my God!" And so when I finally bought a good hat, I actually measured my head, and it was right at the top end of the range, and it was like, "Oh my!" I had no idea. I should have left well enough alone. But,
Buckethead Ward. That'll be your new nickname.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Nah, just laughing. Okay. Well, since you brought it up, I mean, listen, what do you think? Because I really can't have an answer for this. What is the pressure applied to the Major League Baseball, Delta Airlines, politicians that just make them succumb to this self-inflicted wound, harmful business decisions that alienate at least 40-50% of their base probably? What is the pressure that these people are responding to? I don't know how to describe that. Can you?
No, well, the world has moved, whether we like to admit it or not. The world, I think, is moving more woke, more left wing, and I think that's
the world or just the people we see in the world.
People under the age of 30. I think it's been a lot of this education and miseducation in colleges, and now it's going on even in high schools and younger, and it's finally taken root. And so I think that's all out there. I think people are blabbermouths. I think social media is just a really, I've said for a long time, it's a bad thing. I'm not on it because I think it's a net negative. And so, if you get a group, a mob of only 50 people, you kind of freak out in this day and age where, a president of Coca-Cola in the past would have laughed if.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Why do they freak out? Why does that force a billion-dollar CEO company, a multi-billion-dollar company, make such obviously bad business decisions? I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, there's a lot of people, but just stay out of it. Why do you have to get involved at all? That's what I'm saying. What is compelling these people to feel like they have to act?
Because they like the Facebook thumbs up. They want people to like them. Everyone wants everyone to like them. And so the level of what do you call virtue signaling going on, where it's like, oh, look at me, I'm a wonderful person and I care. Without even any knowledge of that law. Listen, you should look at the bright side on this. Stacey Abrams might have finished herself off with this, which would be a wonderful thing, because that there's the bias in the media. That's what breaks my heart, because I was in the media and I spent a lifetime always trying to be fair on the local level. There were people I liked, people I didn't like, but I always gave them equal ink as much as possible. Didn't matter. We started something in the breeze with every candidate in every race. Didn't matter what party, didn't matter what I thought of them, where they got certain amount of ink every week to tell their story and talk about something that they wanted to accomplish in the local community. And, I tried to be very fair to everybody. Frankly, I honestly respected anybody who would put themselves out there and run for office. And I thought, well, good for them. I may not agree with them, but I give them a lot of credit. And and suddenly we're in this world where unfairness, mainstream media is just frankly, just a flacking for the left. I call
Yeah.
them, I've named them. Someone, if they write it down, I want credit for this. Well, let's timestamp this. I call them Pravda on the Potomac. It's just very much like, it's just left wing, and you can't pierce through it. And so you have a guy like Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, who will simply say, hey, this is what I'm for. And it's like, and now they have a love-a-thon on MSNBC and CNN. And I don't think it's going to work out.
Shareholders don't mind when their stock goes down 20% because of it or something. Anyway,
Well,
all right,
probably,
let's move on. Let's move on.
Yeah,
I don't want to
okay.
talk. I just don't understand it. All right, we got some, staying on national news, more woke kind of stuff, I guess. Biden announces new gun control measures, and we have an epidemic of violence. Or my guest yesterday talked about how everything the left does is in reaction to some either perceived fear, right, that they're trying to instill in us. I didn't have a chance to, other than read the headlines. Do you have any idea what was in those executive orders he issued today?
No, I just read it very briefly, and it's there's just so much you can do with executive orders, as you know, and but there's a part of me, I can't lie to you, Mike, as much as I'm conservative and certainly support the Second Amendment, there's a part of me, and I think a part of a lot of Americans, who say there must be something we can do about this. Either certainly people have the right to carry and bear arms, and I totally support that. Most of the people who have guns today are responsible, and they're fine. And what happens is the guns that get away and get into the wrong hands and stuff, and that's usually where the crimes come from. Or even, I think back to Sandy Hook, when it was just mommy spoiling her son who wanted a gun. Mommy passed the background check. The boy didn't. So mommy bought the gun, and the first thing he did is kill his mother and then go to the school and kill 20 more people. So background checks even have limited usefulness.
So let's not debate the issue, but what I think is good. I mean, but it's okay to have a debate, right? You understand both sides of the debate. I'm firm. I even have a little, like the red flag law, even though it was written wrong, even I said, okay, that's a reasonable compromise. And they didn't have enough due process in the law. But I think that's a reasonable expectation that if somebody is known to be a little off and has some kind of history, that you probably don't want guns in their hands, right? Even if it is a constitutional right. But here's what I have a big problem with. Is this kind of attitude, and I know it's not your attitude, even though you might disagree with me and other Second Amendment people, but this attitude from the left, and it's the attitude they have in everything they do, that if you disagree with us, you're not a real person, you're not smart, you're a deplorable, you're something else, right? That you just, there's no room for honest debate. And I think you and I would agree that some of these difficult issues require some really thoughtful debate. But when the vice president of the United States says that me and maybe you and others who believe it are not real people, how is that helpful to anything?
Well, it's not, obviously, and it's and that's what part of the problem has become now. That
right.
There's only one side to the story, and
That's
you're
right.
a dummy if you don't agree with them.
That's right.
And then, like I said, in the past, this was laughably stupid, but today you've got the mainstream media on their side and glomming on and joining in the attack.
They have a safe zone, don't they?
Right. And so people like you and I and others, we're really in a tough spot right now, because there's very little defense of our positions. And so people, younger people who don't pay attention on a daily basis, the way you and I might, sort of buy the mainstream media narrative of, well, those people just aren't that smart, or those people just, if they're listening to CNN or MSNBC, they start to come around to the thinking that we're a bunch of extremists, and we're, the crazies, we're the crazies who stormed the Capitol. that kind of narrative takes hold, and I think it is taking hold. And
All right, let's turn our attention to Rhode Island, and let's start with Governor McKee. Now, you and I had a good conversation, and just by way of background, you have covered him professionally under the Valley Breeze. You've come to know him personally, and I think would call him a friend, along with his family. So and I know when it looked like he was going to become governor, and you and I had some back and forth, I was hopeful that he would be a different governor than Gina Raimondo. We'd see more moderate policy approach. But when we first had you on the show, I expressed concern. I wasn't too happy with some of the things I was hearing from him or not hearing from him. You still have trust that he's going to be a moderate governor. I have strong concerns that he's going to be too weak to stand up to the progressive left. And everything I've seen is he's caving into the progressive left, and the signing of the Act on Climate, or his at least his stated intent to sign it. I'm gonna, well, just for the spirit of debate, I'm gonna make the claim that validates my concerns that he's not strong enough to stand on whatever principle he has. Your thoughts on all that?
well, like I said, I first of all, I wouldn't be signing it, but it doesn't scare the bejeebers out of me the way it does a lot of people. It's a hopeful thing without a lot of, I was reading the journal, and it says, while meeting the goals would require slashing carbon footprints of all energy sectors, there's no specific mandates in the bill. So you have a 30-year window with no specific mandates. Like you, I'm concerned about the fact that it's very vague. But on the other hand, the vagueness is what saves it.
But I don't think that's a fair read, Tom.
Let's look at the TCI. Let's compare it to TCI.
Well, all right. Well, first, let me say this. The bill gives authority to a bunch of unelected bureaucrats to make mandates.
Okay.
I
don't love these employees. They're employees of the governor. And see, I don't believe, like, if they came up, what are you afraid of? Do you have a specific thing where you say they might do this? And I think it would be, because I have some fears too. Don't get me wrong. I don't support this bill. But what is the thing that you think is going to come crashing down on Rhode Islanders' heads in the next couple of years?
All right. So let yes or no. We'll get into a discussion about, do you like TCI?
No.
Okay. So under this bill, if that council, EC4 council, says we need TCI in order to meet our mandate, the state, I don't even know if it needs General Assembly approval anymore. They can just mandate something like TCI to go into place, or else they are subject to lawsuits. So they can, looks like they can implement such plans without any General Assembly oversight. Yes, they could step in, but they're not going to step in. The governor's not going to. The governor may not even be here in 2 years when they put their first plan. But programs like TCI or worse will now be mandated to be enacted. That's the problem.
Okay. If that's true, I'm on your side. I disagree that that's the case.
Okay.
I doubt that's the case. I doubt you're going to live in a world where bureaucrats put a 30-cent tax on people.
Well, how else are you going to get
away with it?
100% carbon free? How else are you going to get there?
I don't know.
Okay.
No, listen, I get it. Let the smart guys, they're going to have to figure this stuff out. But to say that a bunch of bureaucrats are going to raise taxes by a huge amount, like the TCI rate you're talking about, it's not just taxes, it's
regulations, it's limiting energy choices. You're not going to be able to buy gasoline. You're not going to be able to use oil-based fuel. You're not going to be able to, do all. It's not just taxes.
But they make it sound. I think the fear I keep hearing, and the little bit. I got to be honest with you. I'm not listening to talk radio much. I read the paper now and then, but this fear, I just don't see it, because they make it sound like the people are going to have no power. It's going to be rammed down their throat. Not so. This board is going to work for the governor. So if they did what exactly you just said, they put TCI in and suddenly gas goes up 30 cents a gallon because we have to do this for climate. First of all, show me the evidence that says that the use is going to go down by that much. Because between us
Right,
and the
it won't.
walls, the gas price just went up 50 cents a gallon.
No,
And
but
use
if they
hasn't gone
ban
down.
gasoline, they could do that.
But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. First of all,
It's their goal to get rid of cars. That is their ultimate goal.
But ultimately, I'm just trying to deal in Realville here. You know, it was Rush
Oh, this is
Limbaugh.
Realville. This is
Realville.
Realville.
Realville is that if you do that to people, oh, we're going to ban gasoline, and people that have cars, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? We're not going to allow that. We're going to go to Massachusetts and buy all my gas. But it's not going to be that extreme.
All right. So again, I want to refocus. I want to focus on Mckee, not so much the bill. All right. Okay. So we have that debate. Good. Now, what does it say about Mckee? He's tried to position himself, and I would claim, again, we're debating, right? I'm purposely being a little provocative too. Okay, just to say, okay. He's claimed for years he's the small business advocate.
Yeah.
He hadn't done anything about it, but he's claimed it. He's gone through the motions. He's held the meetings. He's held the seminars, and he's made the statements. Here's a bill that absolutely is going to raise the cost of energy and limit the energy choices, not only in families, but on small businesses. It's going to make Rhode Island less competitive in future years, clearly, than other states who don't adopt this. How can he still claim he's a small business advocate when his first major test is so crushingly anti-business?
I just disagree with you. You say it's crushingly anti-business. This requires a whole hour, and I'm just in 1970.
Again, without debating the issue, all the business groups got together and said, no, we don't want this, but yet he did it anyway.
In 1975, we lived in a world where they said we're going to put gas mileage limits on cars, and the car companies are going to have to adjust. And everybody claimed, all the chicken littles, oh my God, we can't do it. The sky is falling. And they did it, and everyone adjusted. Everyone's going to adjust. Everyone's adjusting now. I will say this, as much as I'm not crazy about climate mandates, I'm only a half believer in climate change. I think there's some there. I'm not sure mankind's responsible for all of it, but I think there's something going on. Putting all these things aside, I just don't believe that, well, I'm sorry, my train of thought derailed there, but getting back to Dan Mckee, because you want to talk about Dan Mckee, and you're upset with him.
Yep.
I don't know that I think Dan's being pragmatic, and that's political, and that's politician, and I could say I might be a little bit disappointed in this, but this is just kind of a wishful thinking. There's no mandates in it, and you guys, and I mean conservatives, are basically saying they're going to do this, and they're going to kill the state. I don't believe that for a second.
All right, I have
TCI,
a different.
On the other hand, is instant. TCI is instant pain. So I get that.
Okay.
But I don't get it here. I just see an aspirational law that says over 30 years we want to do something.
All right, here's my larger concern. All right, and so I'm going to raise it up, and let me get your thoughts on this. Sure. This is great. I love this back and forth. I hope you don't mind. My concern, we can argue the bill. We can argue the policy. We can argue the impact, near term, long term. We can argue whether it's just another means to try to exert more control over the people, limit choices, and do what the government wants. But my concern is this issue is more important than the policy involved in it itself. It shows kind of what I think, were alluding to a minute ago, that Dan Mckee believes that in order to survive politically, he has to appease the progressive left. To me, this was a clear appeasement to the progressive left. And if he's going to appease them on this issue, what's he going to appease them on next? And if he's going to right away, listen, there are 15 business groups in one letter, another dozen or so business groups in another letter that said, don't do this. They know it's going to hurt them in the long term, but yet he did it anyway. So if he's going to put the progressive left agenda ahead of the small business agenda, and we don't know what that might look like in future months or years. That's my larger concern, that we're already starting down this appeasement path.
Okay. Well, what you call appeasement, I might call compromise. But you know, you have to work with these. They are clearly, whether I don't like it at all, but they're clearly on the rise in Rhode Island. That's where Rhode Island's going.
Mhm.
So I think Dan McKee probably feels he
Does the
can't.
governor have to go along for the ride, though?
Well, let me ask you this. There are other things that he's talked about. For instance, he's, as I told you last time we met, his North Star is education. And there's a bill out there that wants to kill off the charter schools and it's put a halt on the growth of charter schools.
Big
He's already
plus.
said
That's a big plus for him. Big plus.
He's already said he's going to veto it.
Yeah, big plus.
So, and there's one other thing it's in the background. I want to point out to you. If Dan McKee hadn't got off his bum and worked his rear end off 2.5 years ago to stay lieutenant governor, who'd be governor today?
Yeah, Aaron Regenberg.
Right. He would be governor today. And you would be you would be packing your bags and I would too. It's like,
well,
okay,
all the more reason this act on climate, because you kept saying, well, McKee's going to be governor to oversee it. Well, he may not even be governor in 2 years.
Absolutely. That's true.
So why would we give all this power to this committee and risk, you know, what if a Regenberg or who's the other guy? Brown, what's his name? Or one of these other loonies comes in. Now we're screwed.
Right.
I would be much happier to have Dan McKee than Aaron Regenberg.
But you guys keep saying, I say you guys with respect to conservatives,
okay.
I'm one. But you guys keep saying that it's going to be turned over to bureaucrats who don't have to face the voters. The bureaucrats are going to be working for the governor. The governor has to face the voters. If people came into me and said, hey, Mr. Ward, we notice you burn
they
oil.
give them cover.
What? I'm sorry, what?
They give them cover. Their recommendations aren't going to be put on McKee.
You're assuming the worst of every politician, and I'm just not quite there. What I'm saying is, if someone came to me, I have an oil burner in my basement. It's only 3 years old, and if someone came to me and said, "We don't like oil. You got to rip that out and do electricity instead," and they did that to 1,000 people, 1,000 people would be staring down the governor, their representatives, and everybody else and saying, knock this baloney off. This is stupid. It can't be that extreme. It can't be that extreme. Maybe you say cynically, well, it's the frog. We're going to put the frog in the hot water and then we're going to heat the water up slowly. Yeah, maybe that's what's going to happen. But you know, the world has changed, whether I like it or not. The green train has left the station. They've won.
All right. No, I don't agree with that. They're winning. And that's my last question to you. You can talk about it with regard to Dan McKee if you want. I'm going to put it in that context. You can answer more generally. But the alternative approach would be no. This progressive approach is not good for our economy. I think you agree with that. It's not good for America. It's not good for our culture. And I'm drawing the line. No, I'm appealing to moderate Democrats. I'm appealing to moderate Republicans and moderate independents. And the buck stops here. No. And he would, I believe he would get far more support. He would enhance his political profile far more than trying to pander for progressive left votes and ride that train that has left the station rather than trying to stop it. That's my theory. That's my hope. It's never going to happen, of course. But can you see any Democrat out there who's not just willing to ride the train and take a stand?
Sure, but this is listen, I agree with you. And as I said, I come on and I know Dan McKee, but I'm not defending this decision. He didn't pick up the phone and discuss it with me. So I can't defend. I'm not the governor. But to your point, we are in, whether we like it or not, a very left-wing state. We are in.
Yes.
There's no. I mean, this is what the people want. I don't want it. You don't want it. But I bet you that 60 to 65% of the people in the state are completely on board. Now, I'm not saying that's why he supports it, but I'm saying I don't think he's afraid of it that much, just based on, the look of the electorate. As far as what you're saying, I mean, you're right about this being a bit negative to the small business community and the business community, but can anything be worse than what they've just gone through? I mean, I just think he's
That's true.
I think he's done as much as he can possibly do. I don't think there is nothing in this bill right now that mandates anything in the short term. The other thing I think he's been good about,
And
which
no
I
one
was
claimed
happy
it
to see,
did. No
he's-
one claimed that it did, by the way.
when the government, when the federal government threw $1 billion at him, his first thought is, we're going to take a long time with this money. We're not going to spend it, blah, blah, blah. I don't think he's going to, I couldn't believe the other day when I read that right out of the gate, the unions are saying, hey, give us more money, give us some of our colas back and stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like,
Yeah.
these guys live in another planet. And I can tell you, Dan Mckee is not going to look kindly upon that. So I'm going to win. The way I see it with Dan Mckee as a moderate Republican is, we're going to win some, we're going to lose some. With Aaron
right.
Regenberg, had he won, we'd lose everything.
I agree.
100% of the time. And he'd dream up even more craziness that you can't imagine.
And
So
dream
thank
up is
God for Dan Mckee right
Yeah.
now that he ran.
Dream up
and
is the right word.
Right.
That is the right word. All right.
so-
Tom
so
Ward,
for
I got to
now-
go get to our next guest. Great, lively debate. Thank you. Let's do it again soon. This is great. I love this. I love this kind of back and forth. I learned some things, and it's good, good entertainment, I hope, for our viewing audience. So, Tom,
By the
thank
way,
you again.
I'll mention, I'm going to quick. I give Dan Mckee credit for one more thing. I think last time I was on, I mentioned Yellow Bag Day. We have a townwide cleanup. That's coming Saturday. We have 150 volunteers, and the
Yep.
governor's going to be on his road cleaning it all up, not looking for any accolades. So I appreciate his effort on that.
Yeah, and when I do like the kind of common guy aspect to Dan Mckee. I like all that about him.
Yeah.
He seems like a regular guy, kind of.
He is.
He's not an elitist, right? By
No.
any stretch of the imagination. All right, Tom Ward, Valley
Thank you.
Breeze, former owner. Thank you. We'll have you on again soon. Thank you. All right. See, I as Larry the Liberty guy says, the debates on the right are sometimes more interesting than the debates, when we go against the far left people. And I thought that was a really good debate. Don't necessarily agree with Tom. He didn't necessarily agree with everything I said, but I thought it was good. And that's the way a debate should be: spirited, respectful, and we move on. I just wish we could do that. That's the way our democracy was supposed to happen. Now, there is a debate going on with parents, high school parents. So that'll be the first topic we'll talk about with our regular Thursday guest, Dr. Andrew Boston. Andy, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Hi, Mike. If I might just comment, based on Governor McKee's performance today, I side with your appraisal. He's been co-opted by the progressive, neo-Marxist, whatever.
All right, I didn't see the press conference. What did he say today?
Oh, first of all, I have to say, as a transplanted New Yorker, when this man keeps repeating shots in the arms, shots in the arms, shots in the arms, it's driving me crazy.
I know, me too.
I mean, it's no, but you know what? It's funny and it's not funny because he means it. This is the means to the end for him. Shots in the arms. I mean, and without any concern, he's gung ho about vaccinating kids now. He's gung ho about it. So what happens is, unfortunately, and I think you laid out the case for the green energy lunacy, is that these guys, now he's not as bad as someone who's clinically demented like Biden, but they allow themselves to be co-opted by this very hard left agenda.
Yep.
And in the end, it doesn't matter if he sounds a little more reasonable, if he's just a more down to earth guy. I don't care. Frankly, I'd rather have Gina because you know what you got.
Yeah.
If
you sign the damn bill into law, that's all that matters, right?
Exactly.
All right. So you talked about shots in the arm, shots in the arm, shots in the arm.
Right.
But our first topic today is Schwab's up the nose
Yeah, right.
for high school student athletes. And as you know, and as we've discussed, and I know you saw the video from our parents yesterday.
Right.
Let me just share this and set you up, then have you comment.
Sure.
So in Rhode Island, what I'm calling a testing passport, that you have to get tested in order to play high school sports in this state. You have to test once a week, unless you have, I guess, some medical exemption. I'm not even sure if that's valid, but you have to.
Oh, wow. She said that. I didn't know this, Mike.
Yeah. So when Gina Raimondo started this program, because they did start it in many districts with winter sports, and now 70% of the districts, according to the parents group we had on yesterday, 70% of the school districts in this state are requiring it for spring sports. So you have to have one of these testing passports per se. But Gina Raimondo says, no, we will respect parents and we believe in parental.
But wait, but is there caveat, Mike? Did ex-Governor Raimondo, now doing to the national economy what she did to the local economy, did she say, well, therefore you can't exclude kids from sports participation on the basis of their refusal to be tested?
No, I don't know about it.
I mean, if she didn't say that, then it's just more meaningless political rhetoric.
Probably. But she did say it, and it's not coming true, and it's just more double talk.
Exactly. It's what it sounds like.
So at a high level, doctor, is there any medical rationale or science for high school athletes to go through a weekly invasive testing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why, Mike, I don't want to focus so much on the test, which, by the way, has a lot of favorable characteristics, just the test per se.
We're talking about the process here.
No, it's absurd. I mean, we talked about this a while back in relation to the Brown baseball players, this large high school study that had been done out of the state of Wisconsin, which showed that through the whole gamut of sports that took place in the fall, there was trivial transmission, I mean, barely detectable transmission. And that included, obviously, not just during the sport, but all the transportation and everything leading up to the sport. It's not like they did a very selective study and said, oh, well, on the field, there was no evidence of No, they took the whole gamut of all the sports team interactions, and they said, these aren't significant transmission events. The whole process is not.
So there's so many aspects. You saw the video. Before we move on, as you watched yesterday's video, I know, and we talked this morning. Is there anything else you'd just like to say about this frenzied, hysterical need to test everybody all the time, vaccinate? We know that's coming all the time. Mike,
I'm very pessimistic. This state certainly is not going to get out of it. And you could hear that today in the press conference. Even though finally, thanks really to Pat Ford, because he kept asking this question for weeks, they want 70% of the entire age group from 16 to 110 vaccinated in this 70%. That's it.
Before they start
shots in the arms of all 70% of the, regardless. That's their goal. They've set out date. They're opening up the vaccination to kids down as young as 16. I think it was certainly by May or so that'll be the case, that they'll just start willy-nilly vaccinating 16-year-olds. Again, Pat Ford confronted the governor. He refused to even answer this question with the idea that, well, wait a minute. I mean, these are extraordinarily low-risk groups by the time you get down to the age of, say, 16 to 24. And this is operating under an emergency use authorization. Don't you have any concerns about that? And Shots in the Arms has no concerns about it. So this is what really depresses me. And then on top of all that, so they go through this. Really, we're in new territory here. They go through all this. The carrot that's being held out is not very palatable. There'll be a limited version of the Newport Jazz and Folk Festival with masking and social distancing, and the kids going back to school at both the college and K through 12 levels, nothing really will have changed very much. They'll be masked and distanced to maybe a lesser extent. Instead of 6 feet, we'll be down to 3 feet or something. I mean, it's just, this really is, when people were poo-pooing and calling conspiratorial what was actually said in public about a great reset, this is what it looks like, where it's just endless.
All right, here's the final question on this topic. Then we'll move on to our traditional. But I want to stay on this parents and high school testing passports.
Sure.
The Department of Health does not mandate these tests, and they have, at least in theory, some medical people, experts there, right? The Interscholastic League does not mandate these tests.
Okay.
But yet school districts themselves, they must have stayed at a Holiday Inn last night, but they're playing doctor. And we have a response from Portsmouth said, we have met and we have determined that it's necessary for high school athletes, not other students, just who the hell are they?
They're idiots
to make those kinds of medical decisions.
They're idiots and they're usurpers. They're idiots and they're usurpers. And that's just, you have to call them what they are. But they're given an imprimatur by this larger meta that, hey, this is what life's going to look like going forward. But it does. There was one. If this question led me to one useful thing, I went and looked at the test itself. It's actually not a bad test, and if it were applied, properly, it could give us some useful information. So it's not overly sensitive the way PCR is, which is good. The more people you don't incorrectly classify as having,
shut down a team, quarantine kids. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's good. And actually, the once in a while, the CDC actually does a good study still. And this was published in their Morbidity Mortality Weekly Reports. It was very interesting. It gets back to our whole discussion about cycle thresholds and culturing as the real, and culturing in particular as the gold standard. If you were what it's called, the Binax, if you were Binax negative but PCR positive, okay, and you were culture negative, so as far as I'm concerned,
you're
that's
negative.
it. You don't have the cycle threshold. Mike was 34.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were Binax negative, PCR positive, and culture positive, so you really might have something there. Your CT was 22.
Wow.
So once again, if they would just, if
we had this data, we could make better judgments.
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
All
exactly.
Right. So
but one advantage really of the Binax in terms of rapidity, obviously, is that it's not so sensitive as PCR. So the people that you capture are going to more likely have the virus. And what's interesting though, Mike, is that the concern of these people is that there's too many false negatives, and I'm like, the hell with the false negatives. The problem is the false positives in these kids.
All right, but just to be clear, while you might think that the test is safe, you completely disagree with the notion that these kids need to be tested.
Oh yeah, and let's not lose the forest for the trees, and that's what the parents should be focusing on.
Yeah, and
the extraordinarily low risk that these kids have in terms of how the disease affects them, and also in terms of how they are as spreaders of the illness. They're much lower.
All right, let's move to Rhode Island stats. So here are some data.
We're stuck.
We're stuck.
Yeah, I mean, so, but that's actually good because as much as they're trying to rev up the panic porn again, we're really stuck at a low rate of positivity. So that's 2 months now, Mike. And by the way, this is why the state should be open. This is why the state should be open. So
you're saying we're stuck at a good place.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with this. You won't get that story from the Department of Health. They're still babbling about variants and look. The point is, look, Mike, we can't. Again, another reason you can't lose the forest for the trees. I did a quick calculation today. Rhode Island compared to Texas and Florida. which are wide open now. And Florida's been set pretty much open for months now. Rhode Island has almost a 50% higher per capita mortality than Texas, which is 29 times the size. And it has almost a 60% per capita higher mortality than Florida, which is 20 times the size. And not only are those, and so we're doing worse, and our citizens are penalized more for no ostensible reason at this point, because they actually have higher quote unquote case positivity rates than we have right now.
Yep.
You know, and the fact is that we're in a very manageable situation. This is why when Shots in the Arms talks about dismantling the overflow facility downtown, and yet he won't relinquish the state of emergency, you have to say to yourself, what's going on here, Shots in the Arms? I mean, this is just not good.
Yeah, shots in the arm certainly are not supposed to be for everybody. All right, let's go back to our Rhode Island data. All right, so we just saw that we're kind of holding steady at a pretty low rate, acceptable rate when it comes to positivity rate. Hospitalizations ticked up a little. Any concern here?
A little. And Mike, again, this is one of these issues that it looks to me as if we're never going to resolve. I tried to involve Representative Morgan. I'm sure she was very frustrated. We don't know what these hospitalizations are.
Right.
We don't, Matt Allen did something very good and at least got them to say, well, we can tell you this from the Department of Health that, I think it's at least 10% of the hospitalizations are asymptomatic. And I'm like, okay, well, that's good. But what we really need,
they're there for some other reason.
Right. That's a good surrogate for that. But I'm thinking to myself, that's kind of a small number. I want to know who's in there for pneumonia, first of all. Who's in there, comes in, that's what they're being hospitalized for, pneumonia. We need actually what are called ICD codes for these people. Because, if you're admitted for something serious, like a myocardial infarction, like a heart attack, and everyone's tested, you could be in the ICU, you could die and test positive for COVID, and you'll track through the entire system as a hospitalization, an ICU hospitalization, and a death, and that wasn't your primary medical diagnosis.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah, that's all
right. And again, so we still don't have it, but this is very reassuring, because in the end, this is what it's all about.
That's right.
And I'll also tell you something else, Mike. We've been at this for months. You are still seeing. I actually called into PRO the other day to say, please, I know your news reader is a nice fellow and everything, but you have to go into the Google Doc and do it by the date these events occurred. Look at, we've got a series of zeros that we've had in recent times. And
they're always reporting 5 or 6 additional deaths every day, even though
additional. And these are, and we have to do our best to train the news readers, because that's what they are. Let's be fair, whether they're on the radio or television, that no, don't just use the face sheet on the website. Go to the Google and you can see it. It's Mike. These data never lag the face sheet. In other words, it's not like the face sheet is more current than just clicking one more mouse click and getting to the spreadsheet and saying, oh no, this tells me the exact date and who and how many people died.
All right, let me put it to you this way. Weave 2 thoughts together into a question. Ultimately, you're right. Severe illness and death is ultimately what should get our attention, is ultimately should be the only factor for a state of emergency. We're still in a state of emergency. Dan Mckee hasn't given us a good metric as to when we're out.
But he is, Mike. But he is. In spite of himself, he is. Yes, he's dismantling the overflow facility.
Yes, he is. But the point being, take the flu, for instance. We didn't care how many people got the flu. We only started to care about the flu if massive amounts of people started dying or going into intensive care. So if you look at this kind of death chart, would we see something like this for the flu every year if we were to measure it that way?
Yeah, we probably would. Yeah, I'm
so the number of cases is like irrelevant, isn't
it? Exactly. As a matter of fact, Mike, I mean, I don't want to get too morbid about this, but there was actually a funeral home study conducted in Europe, and you know, in an organized and, you know, ethical way, you know, and you know, if you go into a funeral home, you can culture all kinds of things out of the deceased that are just almost incidental. But if you're including, you know, lots of respiratory viruses, that clearly, when the clinical history is, you know, is available, you know, has nothing to do with their demise. So this is this compulsion and this mass testing. Look, Mike, we've never done any of this before. We have violated all these fundamental principles of epidemiology, and I'm not talking about things that existed, you know, 50 years ago. I'm talking about 2019. You know, so something has gone awry, and now we seem to be locked into it. So that even if we do this mass vaccination campaign and we get to the benchmarks, I wrote them down. They're talking about they're predicting that by May 15th, 70% of all 16-year-olds plus will have had at least one dose of the vaccines, and the regimens will be completed by June 5th. That entire group, that their target of 70% will have been reached by June 5th for full vaccination. Projecting that to the summer, you're going to get a limited, you know, Newport, and then even projecting ahead to the fall, they're saying that no, I mean, basically it's pretty much going to, you know, kids will be in school, but they'll be masked K through 12. They'll be masked on campuses. You know, it's just really abhorrent.
All right. Speaking of vaccines, just quick. Is there any? Would you advise? Do you have any advice? And again, it's just an opinion. People don't take it. You know, is a second shot with Pfizer and Moderna strongly recommended? Is one enough? Does a second shot give potentially more risk of adverse reaction than just having the first shot? Just talk us through that whole, because there's a lot of questions about, you know, we see England only giving the one shot now.
Right.
So,
well,
you know, so what
England did that. England made a tactical decision in terms of getting. I
thought it was a good decision.
You know, between convalescent disease patients that, you know, and natural immunity. Pre-existing immunity. It's really interesting. It's a great story in the Telegraph. Unfortunately, it's behind a paywall, but I was able to get access to it, where they're predicting that as of Monday, the 12th, what are we? Yeah, Monday the 12th, they will have reached, quote, herd immunity, combining all those factors. And part of what got them there was the single dose. Their projection is that at least 73% will have some form of immunity. Yep. And they're saying, you know, that's very important if the theory
holds. So what do you advise on the two shots?
I think the data that I've seen show that there's an incremental benefit, but it's not huge. You get about 70 to 80%. Is there an incremental
risk?
Pardon?
Is there an incremental risk associated with that incremental benefit?
I don't know how big it is, Mike, but you know, because we're not one of the things we're not doing a great job, unfortunately, is the vaccine adverse event reporting system exists, but it's kind of messy. And I wish there was maybe we'll get some better data out of Israel, because that was part of their agreement with Pfizer. If Pfizer lives up to it, that they were going to be, you know, assiduous about recording, you know, everything. But yeah, it does look like there's a slight increased risk of having an adverse reaction with the second shot. First of all, Mike, it's just its probability. I mean, if you get two jabs, you know, you increase.
I mean, is it the same dose you get the first time? You're just getting two, or is the second dose somehow fundamentally different from the first dose?
You know, honestly, that's a good question. It's called a booster. I don't really know. Are you
just getting times two, or are you getting something different? All right.
I don't know. I have to look that up.
All right. New topic. Let me 2 points to make here, but the question I have is on the second part of this headline. So here we see once again Golokhov Prav spreading the fear. Listen, every day the number of cases, one is going to add to the, even though the rate is steady, the positive. So it's just more media hype, but it's the second part of it. I wonder what your research shows. What this article claims is that now that we're some people are now a year out, 6 months, 9 months out from being affected and recovering initially, that there are some long-term impacts neurologically and otherwise to people who have survived the infection. Are you aware of anything like that?
I can. It depends. If people have had severe infections, there are consequences. We see that with all kinds of
any disease.
Yeah, we see that with both bacterial and viral pneumonias, and viral pneumonias, bacterial pneumonias that become more systemic, that affect other organ systems. Classically with influenza, severe cases of influenza can have all these sequelae. But what upsets me is that when we're also now talking about this syndrome that's being attributed to people that have had mild cases, or Mike, worse still, allegedly mild cases with so-called neurologic sequelae. Well, the best study that's been done so far found that some of the people complaining of the worst symptoms wound up testing negative for SARS-CoV-2. So, we have to separate out the legitimate concerns of people that had ICU hospitalizations, seriously ill, non-ICU hospitalizations, and this happens with any serious pneumonia.
All right, so follow my thinking here to get to the question. So we've talked often for healthy people, younger people. It's a 50-50 coin toss. Maybe even your advice wasn't, maybe you don't need a vaccine. But if you do catch the disease, even if you survive and don't get severe, don't end up hospitalized, and certainly if you don't die, but if there is the potential for some long-term negative health impact, if you do become infected at some level, other than a
but you know what, Mike? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm pushing back on. That's what I'm pushing back on.
Let me just finish. Does it make more of a case to get the vaccine? That's my question.
No, because I'm saying that the research on that subcategory that you're defining, even if it's large, points in a different direction. In other words, it takes a severe infection to have long-term sequelae. And so we have to get back to like real medicine. I mean, this is, if you have a mild pneumonia, you don't have long-term sequelae. If you have a pretty much asymptomatic or mildly cold-like infection, you don't have long-term sequelae. I mean, and the evidence for that I've seen, the actual published evidence for that, was pretty striking when it came to neurologic or so-called neurologic sequelae of these infections, where it does look like a psychosomatic situation. And that I believe, look at the stress that the entire society has been under. But getting into the spectrum of real disease, it doesn't seem to be behaving any differently than a pandemic flu or a serious bacterial infection in terms of, there are real consequences to that. These are serious illnesses.
All right. Great stuff, Dr. Andrew Boston. Thanks again for joining us on In the Dugout.
Thank you, Mike.
Our viewers love you. Love you. In fact,
and remember, we got to call him by his new name, Governor Shots in the Ass.
Yes. And one of them even put on the show, and I'm disappointed. They want you to get your own show, but he said still appear with Stenhouse, but you should have your own show. So
no, but it's a serious issue, Mike. We got to defend our kids. If you have a kid that has cystic fibrosis, by all means, vaccinate that kid. If you've got a healthy, strapping young man or a healthy girl, I mean, leave them the hell alone. I really.
All right, Dr. Boston, thanks again. We'll see you next week.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you. By the way, just a note to Larry the Liberty guy. I'm amazed at everybody's still hearing me because my computer has completely seized up. I can't move my mouse. My screen went black except for the two small boxes of me and Dr. Boston. But apparently, I guess the Zoom thing optimizes your computer's resources to make sure the video continues. So I can't turn off the meeting. I can't share a screen. I can't do anything else. Good thing it happened at the end of the show. So Larry, the Liberty guy, when I sign off, you're going to have to end the meeting or stop the recording or something. But anyway,
Okay, Stan, I got it all under control.
my mouse just won't work. So anyway, speaking of next week, now I'm away on a little vacation. I might be back by the end of the week. Not sure if we'll have any live shows next week. We will run some reruns and for sure, or just send out some emails to urge you to watch some of the other shows. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. I've canceled 4 or 5 vacations in the last year. So I'm finally going away. I'm going to golf. I'm going to go away. Not to any place exotic. I'm just going someplace where I can golf a lot and get away. So we will see you then. But again, to wrap up today's show, the theme is everywhere. And people think you're hysterical or a fanatic when you say the word, but it's really not. The theme of government tyranny is everywhere in our lives, whether it's forcing us to get vaccines, whether it's forcing high school athletes to take tests, whether it's limiting our energy choices, whether it's raising taxes on the choices we do make, whether, as we saw, just think of the topics we talked about only today, whether it's limiting our Second Amendment rights. We all know about the cancel culture and free speech, that it's not the government limiting your speech, but it's the government calling on their friends in big tech to limit your speech. We know as a fact. We've heard it happen in this state. We had a guy on from the Board of Elections who said, yeah, I know the Secretary of State's office called and had that candidate's Facebook page shut down. So is there really any difference whether it's the government doing it or one of their surrogates? See, this is what socialism is. These unholy partnerships with elites and powerful people and powerful entities conspiring to give more power and money to themselves, and to control more and more aspects of your life, and to make you think that it's in your own good with these false narratives. Friend, there is no other word for it than tyranny, because you didn't approve of all this. You didn't elect them to do this, but they're doing it, and they're doing it in every aspect of our lives. We can't even go watch a baseball game now without getting politics and tyranny shoved down our face. I mean, it's bad. It's pervasive, and it shouldn't be this way. We're going to keep banging the drums. I hope you will keep watching. I hope you will tell more of your friends about it. I hope you will subscribe to that red button there on YouTube. And I hope you'll tell your friends. We need more viewers. We need to get the word around. We're going to fight. We're going to take the arrows until they shut us down. And if they shut us down, we'll find another way to get out there. We will do that. We're not afraid of taking the arrows. We're not afraid of the pressure. We talked about pressure with Tom Ward, our first guest. He says the pressure from the left, some Governor Mckee apparently can't stand it, can't stand up to it. We do. We stand up to it. We take the arrows. That's our job. And I thank you for listening. I'll see you, maybe not next week, but I'll see you certainly the